Interesting topic we've got tonight. See if you can spot the twist. Or is there one? Hello everyone and welcome to the Bearded Geeks, the weekly grab bag of topics covering movies, comics, video games, and TV. My name is Jages, I am the Beard Master of Twists, and I'm rocking it in the Beard Cave today. Got a great topic tonight. Decided to do another top 5 list. So tonight we're doing top 5 favourite movie twists. My favourite movie twists. So I'm looking forward to talking about that tonight, but we just go over some generalities like we do. Fuck, it's been hot. It has been very hot here in Tasmania in the last week. Over the weekend, it was like 30, 35 degrees. We had Australia Day on Friday, had a great barbecue, ran at our mate Richie's place. He had a pool, bought a pool, an above ground pool, so we got to frolic about in the pool in the heat. But it was like 35 degrees over 3 days, 35 degrees Celsius. So what does that work out to be in Fahrenheit? What, like 90 degrees Fahrenheit? 95? Something like that? It was up there. So we had 3 like massively hot days over the long weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Last night, it snowed up in the mountains in the Great Lake. So the Great Lake's probably like an hour and a half drive from here, sort of up in the Tassie Highlands a little bit. And it snowed. And we had a massive temperature drop overnight. It went down to like 6 degrees, so it was pretty cold. So that's our great Tassie weather down here at the bottom of the world, or it's probably just bloody climate change. Or that might just be fake news, who knows. But yeah, it's been hot, it's been cold, it's been muggy and sticky and sweaty and horrible. And all I can say is thank fuck for air conditioning and swimming pools. Because, had a great time in the swim pool over the weekend. Also, while we're talking generalities, I did just finish watching Season 4 of Black Mirror. So, I've seen every episode now, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Fantastic, fantastic series. Thanks, Pat, for bugging me for so long to try to get me to watch it. I finally did, and I love the bloody shit out of it. Really looking forward to doing a Black Mirror episode here on the show. Just got to wait for Bob to watch all 4 seasons and catch up. So, Bob, get onto it, mate. Bloody get onto it. Want to do a Black Mirror episode. It'll be heavy spoilers. Heavy spoilers. But if you haven't watched Black Mirror, get onto it. Because eventually we're going to do a Black Mirror episode and we're going to talk about it. And you don't want to have it spoiled. So get onto it if you haven't seen it. So I want to keep the episode a bit shorter tonight. So I'm just going to jump straight into the news. So, first of all, this is kind of funny. And interesting at the same time. And when you think about it, it's kind of perfect casting as well. John Cena, WWE superstar, part-timer now. What's he like, 16-time WWE champ? Or is he going for that 17th, beat Ric Flair? I think that's the gist. He'll probably come for a part-time stint and win the belt again. And he'll go on to have the highest bloody title wins in bloody wrestling history or whatever. But anyway, we're not talking about wrestling. John Cena is in talks to play Duke Nukem in an adaptation of the video game series. Fuck. I mean, what do you say? When you think about it, it's kind of perfect casting. John Cena as Duke Nukem. You're like, yeah, I could see that. And I've seen the guy in like a lot of supporting comedy roles and stuff. So, I mean, the guy's got chops. He's got comedy chops and that. And he's a big dude, and we've seen him do action movies and stuff. So we can probably handle that side. But I mean, the thing about Duke Nukem is here's the problem with making a Duke Nukem film today. The material, the character is inherently like stuck in the 90s. He is tied to that era. And the humor and the jokes, the character, he just doesn't fit in today's world. And I think if they did the film, they would definitely have to realize that. It would probably have to be like fuck knows, they probably would do that. Duke travels in time to the present and it's a whole fish out of water story. Or it'll just have to be like a massive piss take sort of on the material. Because it won't work any other way. If they make it work, fuck it. Take my hat off to you. But, just sitting here, I'm not a bloody writer or anything, but I don't really see a way of, translating that as it is into today's world, because it won't work. Because they tried that 6-7 years ago with Duke Nukem Forever, and look at what happened to that game. Like, people were waiting, for a decade for that game. It was started, cancelled, started from scratch, and it tanked. It was one of the worst games of the last decade. I mean, no one liked it. You would go to, like, EB Games, a local video game store, and that here in Australia, and you would see it, like, on the bargain shelf for, like, I think it was, like, $5 or $6, $7. It was cheap as fuck. I actually nearly considered buying it one day, but I'm like, nah, that game's just going to be terrible. Even for $5, so I'm not going to worry about it. Would I watch this movie? Yeah. I mean, if it had a great trailer, if it sort of held me interest and whatever, I'd give it a go. You probably couldn't do too bad on the material. Second of all, we got a couple of new trailers in the last week. We got a new trailer for Pacific Rim Uprising. We got the story trailer, which didn't really give away too much story. Pretty much the only thing that they told you that you didn't know from the previous trailer is that the kaiju are back. How are they getting back? Oh, someone from our world is bringing them here, is opening a doorway and bringing them here. They're bringing them through. And looks like we're getting some Jaeger on Jaeger action. Looks like we got like a bad guy Jaeger and stuff. Looks pretty good. Yeah, I'm keen for that movie. Giant robots fucking smashing into each other, fighting monsters, giant monsters. It's great. I can't wait. That'll probably, hopefully, be one of the better popcorn flicks of the summer. You can just go, switch off, watch a big, silly action movie with giant robots and that, and have a good time, and then jump in the car and go home, back to your depressing life or whatever, and watch some Black Mirror. Because you need it. We also got a trailer today for Ant-Man and the Wasp. So we got our first look at that film. Marvel are calling this their first rom-com. So, Ant-Man was kind of like a heist film. And now Ant-Man and the Wasp is going to be their first, rom-com. Their first romantic comedy. It looks pretty good. It looks kind of silly. Very, in the same sort of vein as the first film. Lots of fun with the size changes and the shrinking. There's this great scene where he shrinks and goes under a truck or whatever, and then enlarges, and it just like flips the van or the truck or whatever it is, flips it over, and it looks pretty cool. And great little bits of comedy and dialogue and that in the trailer. It looks pretty fun. I'll definitely go see it, obviously. But yeah, man, I'm really feeling that superhero fatigue. But I am really looking forward to Black Panther. They had the premiere for Black Panther yesterday, the day before, and it's already sort of hitting, that critical acclaim already. Everyone who's seen it is loving it, and it's being called a cultural phenomenon, which is great. I'm really looking forward to this movie, Black Panther. 2 weeks. We should have an episode of that coming up in the next few weeks. So I look forward to that. It's also been confirmed that the recently delayed New Mutants film from Fox, it will not have a US R rating. So it's not going to have an R rating in the US, contrary to what we've heard all along in the lead up to this film. But when quizzed about the possibility of costumes and whether the film will follow in the sort of the harder edge Deadpool and Logan vein, the R-rated sort of edginess, the director Josh Boone said, "There are no costumes. That alone makes it different. They can't be with the other kids at the X-Mansion. They're too fucked up. They've all killed people, whether intentionally or unintentionally. This movie is probably the hardest PG-13 ever made. I mean, we've pushed it. The horror is pretty dark, but there's also an emotional core too. If I can scare you and make you cry, that's the goal." New Mutants is something I'm really looking forward to. Something with a massive spin on the superhero genre. I mean, it's getting stale. I mean, as much as Marvel changed it up and we're getting tired of it, it is getting stale. The superhero genre is wearing me down. I have got that superhero fatigue, like, really bad. But, these Marvel movies, they just keep churning them out. And they just keep getting better. And they're all starting to be different. They're all gradually evolving. If you go through the different phases, they're all evolving. They start as this. In the next phase, they turn into something else. In the third phase, they're starting to turn into sort of buddy films or whatever. And they're putting spins on genres. Like they describe Thor Ragnarok as a road movie, and now Ant-Man and the Wasp as a romantic comedy. So it's exciting to see the superhero genre put a spin on these movies. New Mutants, a horror film, so it's going to be great. Really looking forward to it. But like we said, that's been delayed and it's not going to be out until next year. I think it's like next February. That's really far off, but we'll have to wait and see. So as I talked about it last week, and as I kind of suspected, and it had been talked about, the new Dundee movie is actually a hoax. So we've had all these trailers come out. They're actually to promote Australia, the land down under, like they did with Paul Hogan back in the 80s. But I've seen a lot of people complain about this, but there's been even more of these trailers come out leading up to the Super Bowl. There was a big 2.5 minute one, which actually made it look like a movie, and there were so many like Aussie celebrities in that, and Russell Crowe, even though he's technically a Kiwi, but we've sort of claimed him as our own. I mean, we had like Ruby Rose, Margot Robbie, we had Luke Hemsworth, we had Hugh Jackman, Russell Crowe, like I said. I can't remember who else was in it. But there were a lot of other, like, famous Australian actors and stuff and that in there, and comedians, and it actually looks really great. I actually want to see this movie, but now, one thing I'm wondering is this actually, like, is this just like a double fake out? So, is it a movie that they actually faked us into thinking is a trailer, but hang on a minute, it actually is a movie, and we just, like, bullshitting you? But yeah, it looks like it's going to be a Super Bowl trailer ads, but we'll find out in the next few days. Or by the time you hear this, we definitely would have already found out because it would have been on the bloody Super Bowl, which just happened a few days previous. Kind of disappointing, but at the same time, that 2.5 minute trailer is actually pretty cool. And I've got a big thing for Ruby Rose, so Australia. We have a release date for the new God of War game, April 20 worldwide. We got the release date a few days back in the new story trailer that was released. Holy fuck, this game looks fucking phenomenal. I mean, it looks so beautiful. The story seems really great, and I'm so glad that Kratos isn't fucking yelling at shit all the time and just screaming. I'm like, just chill out, dude. Just talk about this with someone instead of just going in there and murdering stuff. I mean, he talks about in the trailer that killing gods, has consequences, and he's with his son, and it's described in his trailer that his son is struggling with the same sort of darkness within himself that Kratos has always sort of struggled with. I guess he's like a demigod now because his mother was human. Kratos is a god, so I guess he's a demigod, Atreus. So pretty much the basic story is Atreus' mother has died, and her last wish was to have her ashes taken to the top of some mountain or something like that, but it's in like another realm. And Kratos has got to take his son and take these ashes, to this spot to fulfill his wife's final wish. And, he has to deal with bloody gods and monsters and that along the way. And himself, all the anger and rage and that within himself that, I guess all the regret and that he has, for the things he's done. And I guess trying to teach his son to not be as he was, the same as he was, to be filled with anger and vengeance and just, express yourself in those ways. You got to be smart. You got to think. And the final bit of news for the night, we talked about the new Cloverfield movie last week, how it's possibly being picked up by Netflix, and it may debut on Netflix, which is fine, but it also may be titled Cloverfield Station, which fits with its sort of sci-fi aesthetic, space station or whatever, which is cool. It's a great title. I'm happy with it. But we just found out, hot off the presses, it's been confirmed that the World War II set genre film Overlord will be the fourth film in the Cloverfield universe. It's finished filming, it's already done filming, and it will be out later this year. Fucking hell. They're really sort of keeping these things under wrap. I read online that it was suspected. This is actually the first I've ever heard of it. But I have read online, people have heard about this previously, suspected that it may be another film tied into this Cloverfield anthology universe. I got the plot here. I'm going to read it to you. Sounds pretty cool. In Overlord, on the eve of D-Day, a group of American paratroopers are dropped behind enemy lines to carry out a mission crucial to the invasion's success. But as they approach their target, they begin to realize that there is more going on in this Nazi-occupied village than a simple military operation. They find themselves fighting against supernatural forces, part of a Nazi experiment. Sounds pretty fucking cool to me. I dig these Cloverfield films. I really do. I love these. I like anthology series. Like I said, in our top 5 favourite TV shows, one of my favourite TV shows of all time is The Twilight Zone. Pat finally got me into Black Mirror. I just watched it all. I love Black Mirror. It's a great sci-fi anthology series. You know, tech paranoia. And I like these movies. I like how these stories are independent, but they sort of carry over these same sort of supernatural science fiction themes, you know, kind of intertwined in this same, I don't want to say universe, because it's always like, oh, we want to build all these movie universes and everything and make more money and tie everything together. But, you know, these are just in the same theme. You know, these movies are tied together, which is great. So, please, more Cloverfield films. I want them all. I want to see them all. I will pay to watch them all. Thank you very much. So we're going to go on to our topic tonight. This is actually the second episode in a row that I'm doing a solo show. Bob should be back next week. We've got a great topic lined up. And by the time this episode comes out, Pat's probably going to be a dad again because they're pretty much on the borderline, you know, for having their second child. So exciting times. Baby could come at any time. But yeah, by the time this comes out, you know, he could be a dad again. The Bearded Dads. It's half of what this show is. Dad jokes and baby stories. So like I said, we're going to go into this topic. Now today, I want to do a topic. I could have just talked about another film or done like a retro review or something like that. That was my original plan. It's good doing solo shows because I can fit in stuff that I actually want to talk about. Like I can go back and just like cherry pick a film out from 30 years ago or something like that. And I'll just do a review about it and talk about it. Or last week where I did Shirtless Bear Fighter, which you should totally pick up, by the way, and listen to that episode. But because I did a comic episode last week, I feel like I should do another movie one this week. I feel like doing a movie one anyway. So I'm going to do a list. I'm going to do a top 5 list, but this one's just for me. This one's my list. I want to do my top 5 favorite plot twists in movies. Now, to be specific, I'm talking about the actual twists in the film. Now, these are the twists that actually got me. Like, these are the ones that really got me. Like, whoa, I never fucking saw that coming. Or that's totally blown me away, that twist. I'm not talking about the actual film. I'm talking about the twist in the film. But it all sort of ties together. So I'm not sort of judging these movies on, this is the best movie with a twist. This is my personal, one of my favorite twists, and one of the ones that, you know, sort of got me the most. Alright, so, first off, on my top 5 favourite movie twists, also, spoiler heavy, so if you haven't seen any of these movies, which I haven't even mentioned yet, you might not want to listen to this list, because you'll get the movie fucking spoiled for you. So, first up, number 5, Saw. Now, years ago, I used to buy, well, only up until sort of recently in the last 12 months, I used to buy Empire magazine, Australia's greatest movie magazine, and then they changed it to the world's greatest movie magazine. I've been buying it since 2001. I bought it religiously every month. I had massive stacks of it in the cupboard, stacked up. I used to go back and flip through them and reread everything, reread articles, reread lists and reviews and everything. I loved it. I loved that book. I only stopped getting it because it's too bloody expensive. The price just kept going up, and all this shit I can find out online anyway. So, the very first time I ever heard of the movie Saw was in Empire magazine. I saw this article about this movie Saw where it had been at Sundance, and they had the picture in there of Dr. Gordon, Lawrence Gordon, Carrie Elwes, where he's reaching out across the floor to the phone, which is, you know, out of his reach. So this was the first sort of introduction that I had to this movie, and reading the article, I'm like, this actually sounds pretty cool. This sounds like a cool little, I'll say, horror movie. It's not actually a horror movie though. It's really more of a psychological thriller, but it's kind of like stuck in the world of a horror movie. But just to make it easier, we'll just call it a horror movie. So the first introduction I had to it was in this magazine, so I'm like, gotta keep my eye out for it, keep my eye out for it. Comes out on DVD, I buy it, I watch it, I'm not disappointed. Written, created, directed by 2 great little Aussie filmmakers, Lee Whannell and James Wan, who's gone on to bigger and better things. First of all, if you haven't seen Saw, the movie is 2 guys wake up in this seedy bathroom, chained to pipes, and they're actually trapped. They're trapped in this room, and there's a dead body in the middle of the floor, blood, brains, bloody splattered everywhere. He's got a gun in one hand, and he's got a tape recorder in the other hand. And these 2 men, they actually find out that they are the newest victims of the Jigsaw Killer. Now, the Jigsaw Killer doesn't actually kill anyone. He puts them in situations where It's pretty much, what would you do to stay alive? You know, how much blood would you spill to stay alive? You know, if you die, that's not a consequence of, you know, his actions. He didn't directly do it. You know, it's their own fault. He gives them ample opportunities to live if they play the game. You know, they will spill blood, but they will live at the end of it if they play the game by his rules. So these guys go on. Lawrence Gordon, he's a doctor. He wakes up, and his job is to kill Adam, who's the other guy on the other side of the room. He actually finds out that his wife and daughter are being held hostage, and if he doesn't kill Adam, then Jigsaw is going to kill his wife and daughter. Well, not Jigsaw directly, it's another guy actually, Zap, but that's another story. And Adam's role is just to stay alive. You know, how far would he go to stay alive? So we've all seen this movie. We go through this. They're listening to tapes. It's flashing back. It's cutting to Danny Glover and that. There's a couple of cops who are trying to solve the Jigsaw case and, you know, find out who this guy is, find out where these people are. Things go along in that. And eventually Lawrence takes a hacksaw and he cuts off his own foot to escape. And then as he's going, he says to Adam, he says, I'm going to bleed out. I'm going to go get help. You can't, you know, you pretty much can't go anywhere, but wait here. Don't worry. I'll go get help. I'll be back. Adam listens to another tape and finds out that Zap, the guy who's there to kill Lawrence's wife and daughter, he's actually a victim of Jigsaw as well. You know, Jigsaw's poisoned him, and he probably has to kill these two, and Jigsaw will give him the antidote and save his own life. You know, how much blood would you spill to stay alive? Again. But then we also find out that this guy, this body that's in the room with him the whole time, it's actually Jigsaw. He stands up and he rips his make-off off his head, and because Jigsaw likes to watch, you know, the people in this situation. So in this first film, you know, all through the other films and that, he's always watching through like CCTV or something like that. He's never really sort of actually there in the room. But the big twist in this first one is that Jigsaw's actually in the room with him. He's been playing possum the whole time, and he gets up and he rips all this shit off his head, and he says to Adam, the key to your escape is actually in that tub. I left it in that tub with you. But, you know, you could have got out straight away, but it's, you know, it's been sucked down the drain. If you didn't panic or whatever, you know, you could have been freed. And then Jigsaw, you know, leaves the room, slams the door shut, you know, game over! You know, and Adam screaming in the darkness, and then the movie ends. This was a great twist. I actually really love this, that he was in the room, and he's actually, you know, this guy who was there to kill Lawrence's wife and daughter, he was a pawn as well in this game. You know, he was a victim. So that was particularly one twist that I really did enjoy in those movies. Unfortunately, as the movies went on, you know, it just became more about the traps and, you know, the gore and what it, you know, the kind of torture porn semi-genre that came out. Not exactly torture porn, kind of, some of the traps. But yeah, a lot of them, yeah, pretty much just focus on that, the grotesque. It became more about that than the actual, you know, the psychology of Jigsaw and the thrills, I guess, of the mystery. Just became more about the traps and the gore. But I actually kind of like Saw 2. I actually quite like Saw 2. It doesn't hold a candle to the first one, but for what it is, I actually quite enjoy it. So that was number 5, Saw. That was my 5th favourite movie twist. Number 4 is Unbreakable. Now, I actually, when M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong first came out, you know, with The Sixth Sense, I guess everyone's wondering sort of why that isn't on this list. You know, that was really the first big twist that sort of got everyone sort of in at the tail end of the 90s. There have been other great twists in other movies. I mean, look at half of David Fincher's like film catalogue. Half of those movies he has some form of twist at the end or in the middle of the film, in the case of Gone Girl. And Sixth Sense is a great movie, but for my money, the one that got me out of all Shyamalan's films was at the end of Unbreakable. Now, Unbreakable stars Bruce Willis as David Dunn. He's just a father, he's a security guard, he's on a train, and he's making his way home, and then there's a massive accident, and this above-ground train crashes, and everyone on the train is killed except for David Dunn. He emerges at the hospital, the doctor tells him, you know, there's nothing wrong with you, you're completely uninjured, you don't have a scratch on you, you don't have a broken bone, nothing ruptured, punctured at all. You're completely 100% fine. But everyone else on the train has been killed. David makes his way through the movie. He meets another man named Elijah Price, who is played by Samuel L. Jackson. He owns a comic book shop, and he sort of puts into David's head and David's son's head that he's kind of like a superhero. You know, he asks him all these questions. You know, do you ever remember the last time you were sick, that you had a cold? And David can't remember. He's like, no. He's like, I've actually never had a cold. He's like, can you remember the last time you were injured? And he's like, actually, I was injured. I had a car accident when in my teenage years, and it ruined my football career. Like, I was going to go on to be a pro football player or whatever. And this car crash actually sort of sidelined me, and I was injured from that, and I never played football again. And Elijah's like, that's, kind of hard to believe, all these other stuff, and that's done. But I guess you're not. So as the film progresses, David actually finds out, he's lifting weights and stuff, and then his son puts extra weights on the bar and everything, and he just keeps, he can lift an incredible amount of weight. Later in the film, he starts to realize that he's always sort of had this sixth sense, like he can just sense sort of evil about people, or he can sort of picture things in his head. Like, as a security guard, he accidentally bumps into one guy and he gets a flash of him, like with a gun in his jacket. And he follows this guy and he actually finds out, yes, he does have a gun. So the movie progresses, and later on, is he kind of a superhero? Superheroes don't exist. This is the real world. And then his son tries to shoot. His son's going to shoot him. He's like, I can prove it. I'm going to prove that you actually are a superhero and all this sort of stuff. And then we get to the end of the film, and David's at an art exhibition at Elijah's comic book shop, and Elijah asks him out the back, and they go out the back and they talk. And Elijah actually reveals that he is the mastermind behind everything. He's orchestrated everything. David shakes Elijah's hand, and he gets this flash of Elijah causing all of these accidents, all of these disasters. He's a terrorist. Elijah's actually the one who caused the train crash on the train he was on. Like, his entire life, he has this condition where his bones are actually like glass. He's so brittle, he's like a bird with hollow bones. Like, any small little bump or anything could break his bones. So he's the complete opposite to David. David's pretty much indestructible, and Elijah is as brittle as glass. And he tried to find someone superpowered. So someone that was the opposite of him. He always suspected, hearing all these stories, that there's someone greater out there, and he tried to find a superhero. And then it kind of works out that these guys are the opposites of each other. He's sort of the hero, and Elijah's the villain. I don't think I've really explained this very well. It's been a little while since I've actually watched Unbreakable. But, it is revealed that Price orchestrated the entire train crash looking for someone like David. Maybe not David necessarily, but someone like him. And going back to the football injury he actually had, he never actually got injured. He actually just faked the injury because he didn't want to be a big football star like everyone was pressuring him to. He just wanted to walk away from it. So he faked an injury. So technically, he's never really had an injury in his life. So he is a superpowered person. And then off that, last year, we had Split, which when I went into the movie, spoiler alert for Split, I actually suspected, like from the trailers and stuff, that this may be set in the same universe as Unbreakable, because just seeing the trailers and stuff, James McAvoy's character saying, the beast is coming, the beast. I'm like, what if this is like a hidden sort of split personality, a sort of superpowered personality? You see him in the trailers, like, pulling apart bars and climbing along walls and stuff like that, and it's like, that's kind of like a superhero-y or a supervillainy kind of thing to do. And then it's revealed right at the very end of that movie that it actually is like a thematic sequel to Unbreakable, with David Dunn appearing in a diner at the end of the movie, Bruce Willis, and somebody asking him about, this is like that guy from like 15 years ago that who orchestrated all those accidents. What was his name? What did they call him? And he's like, Glass. They called it Mr. Glass. And there's going to be another sequel to that, which is just finished filming, with James McAvoy, Bruce Willis, and Samuel L. Jackson all come back to reprise their 3 roles in a sequel to both Unbreakable and Split, called Glass. So that's really exciting. So that was my 4th favourite twist of all time. It's really hard explaining twists. Number 3. Another twist that really sort of hit me when I watched this movie is in Shutter Island. So the movie's based in 1954 with Leonardo DiCaprio playing a US Marshal, Teddy Daniels, and his partner, Chuck, played by Mark Ruffalo. They're on their way to Ashcliffe Hospital for the Criminally Insane, which is on Shutter Island in the Boston Bay, I think it is. And they've come to look for this woman who was admitted, who's gone missing, Rachel Solando. She was locked up for drowning her 3 kids. And Leo and Chuck both go to this island, but Leo's got his own baggage because his wife was actually murdered in a fire by a guy named Andrew Latis. So the movie goes along with DiCaprio and Ruffalo. They're searching this island. It all seems a bit shady and stuff. Like, shady stuff's going on. Ben Kingsley's in it. And they're trying to solve this disappearance of this woman. Did she actually disappear, or did something sort of nefarious happen to her on the island? Is there like some weird experiments or something like that going on? In the end, Leo makes his way to the lighthouse on the island, and he gets all the way to the top thinking he's going to find like some experimentation chamber where they're doing experiments on people and it'll all be revealed. But he gets to the top and he walks in and here's Ben Kingsley sitting at a desk. And the twist of Shutter Island is that Teddy Daniels, Leonardo DiCaprio, his name isn't actually Teddy Daniels. He is Andrew Latis, and he's a patient on Shutter Island. His wife, he actually murdered. She had depression, I think, something like that, and she actually drowned their 3 children. And sort of in his rage and his grief, like, he killed his wife in a fire. Man, I really should watch these movies before I did all this. Anyway, so Andrew Latis, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, he has this paranoid sort of psychosis that he's sort of projected himself as a US Marshal trying to solve this case because he can't deal sort of with the guilt and the grief of losing his 3 children and then killing his own wife. So he's created this sort of paranoid fantasy that his wife was murdered by Andrew Latis, who's he's sort of disassociated from himself, and he's a US Marshal trying to solve the murder of his wife. But what's actually happening is he is a patient on the island, and Ben Kingsley and Mark Ruffalo, who's actually a psychiatrist on the island, they've played into his fantasy. So they're like, okay, we're going to role play your fantasy and let you get right to the end and actually solve it and realize that all of this is fake, that this is actually a paranoid psychosis that you're trapped in, hoping to break him out of that psychosis and get him back to being a normal man. Like, and they say it at the end of the film, like, we've tried this a few times before and you've come close, but you've realized what's happened, but you've always like slipped back into this paranoia, this fantasy that you've created. And they're like, this is pretty much a last-ditch effort, because if this doesn't work, then we're going to have to, like, lobotomize you. So, at the end of this scene, he sort of accepts that it is a fantasy and that he did murder his wife and he is Andrew Latis. And they're like, yes, we're hopeful this is going to stick. And then later on, it shows him sitting on the steps next to Mark Ruffalo, and he starts referring to him as Chuck again, which means that he's slipped back into the psychosis. And he has this great line. The line at the end of the film, it goes like, which would be worse, to live as a monster or to die as a man? And then all the sort of the orderlies and that come and get him to take him away to be lobotomized. So I didn't explain that very well again. The twists are really hard to explain, but you guys have seen it. You know what I'm talking about. So Shutter Island was my number 3 favorite twist of all time. That was one that like really got me. Now we're getting down to the nitty gritty, and this one is a bitch to explain, so bear with me. My number 2 favorite twist is in Memento. Now, the very first time I ever saw Memento was in 2002. I was in my year 11 English class, and we watched it as a film study, studying sort of the narrative of the film, where it is told sort of, the black and white scenes are told in chronological order, but then cutting back to the coloured scenes of the film, which are actually shown in reverse order, which is actually quite brilliant. And we were doing it as a film study in that class. And the first time I watched it, like, I was just really blown away by this movie. I just thought it was just so well done. It was so incredible. Like, it was an interesting story, but the way it was told, like, the problem with that movie is now that people mainly remember it for the way it's told rather than the actual story of the film. You know, the story comes secondary to the way it was told in chronological order in one way and then in reverse in another, sort of sequentially happening at the same time. So this was one of the first movies to really sort of do that. And, you know, it's been copied in that since, but this was the first. So the film stars Leonard Shelby, and he was an investigator for an insurance company. So he would go around and investigate people's claims, whether they were actually, you know, if they were disabled, whether they really were disabled, or they were just faking it, you know, to claim insurance. So he was an investigator for an insurance company. So in the black and white scenes, he tells this story about Sammy Jankis, who has the similar condition to him. Now, that's really important, so remember that, because we're going to go back to Leonard's story. Now, what actually happened to Leonard is that his wife was attacked. They were attacked at home. They had some home invaders, and him and his wife were attacked. His wife was raped and murdered, and Leonard received a head injury, and because of the head injury, he now has anterograde amnesia, which means that he remembers everything in his life perfectly up until the moment of his accident. So his entire life, his childhood, everything about his wife, everything up until that moment. When he received the head injury, because of the anterograde amnesia, he can no longer create new memories. So he's kind of like a goldfish. So he can go for about maybe a 5-minute period, maybe a 5-10 minute period before his brain pretty much resets. So he'll pretty much only live 5 to 10 minutes at a time, and then he'll live for 5 minutes, and then everything that's happened in that 5 minutes he'll forget, and his brain will just reset, and he just remembers everything about himself, you know, up until the accident. So the plot of the actual movie is, he has this anterograde amnesia, but he's trying to solve his wife's murder. He's covered in tattoos, which are clues about the case. He takes Polaroids for references of everyone and leaves himself notes and everything, trying to solve his wife's murder. Stick with me. Now, going back to Sammy Jankis, previously, before he had his head injury, he investigated this case about Sammy Jankis, and he had the same condition as him. So, whether it was actually a legitimate case or not, and they tested him for months, and then they found out that, yes, he actually had the amnesia, and it was a true case, and they got their payout or whatever. But over time, his wife, it became a real strain on his wife because he never remembered anything, and she thought that he was actually faking it. And his wife was a diabetic, so she came up with this plan. She had to have her insulin administered every day, and she would call to Sammy and ask him to come over and do her insulin for her, and then he would go away and forget, and she would call him over again that she needed her insulin done, hoping that if he was actually faking it, he would stop, and, you know, or he would remember, one of the two. So he forgot, and he administered all this insulin, and sort of just in her, I guess, her grief, and being so upset that she actually went into insulin-induced coma and died. So Leonard always remembers this. He's conditioned himself. He even has a tattoo on his hand, remember Sammy Jankis. He's conditioned himself about his actual condition, so he can explain his condition to people and remember the actual story. So back to Leonard. So Leonard is trying to solve this murder of his wife, and he's teamed up with Teddy, played by Joe Pantoliano, who's actually an undercover cop, and he worked on his wife's case, and he actually, you know, is trying to help him find John G., the man who killed his wife. So they go through this movie, and they're trying to figure out all these clues, and there's lots of back and forward, and it's kind of hard to follow, and you don't know what's going on. And then you get right to the end of the movie, and Joey Pants is at this warehouse with Leonard, and he's telling him that we have John G here, you're going to kill him or whatever. And then the twist drops, and we actually find out that Leonard already killed John G 12 months earlier. So Teddy actually, he was an undercover cop. Like I said, he was assigned to his wife's case. He believed Leonard, and he felt sorry for him, and he actually helped him track down John G and murdered him. And when he did, he hoped that, it would trigger something in Leonard's mind and he would remember that he'd actually killed him and it would stick. But it didn't. He forgot. He forgot he did it. And so 5 minutes later, he was out looking for John G. He was still looking. So Teddy, deciding to use this to his advantage, set up all these clues in that for Leonard, that all these undercover, well, not undercover, beg your pardon, all these sort of low-level, criminals and drug lords and, drug smugglers and drug dealers and all these kind of people, he was setting up to be John G, and he pretty much had Leonard being sort of a hitman going around killing all these drug dealers. And sort of cleaning up, sort of killing two birds with one stone. Leonard would get his revenge for that 5 minutes, and then he'd forget, and Teddy would have dealt with some bad guys, some banes to society. Then we also find out that the Sammy Jankis story, while the Sammy Jankis story was true, it actually wasn't Sammy's story about his wife. It was actually Leonard's story. So after the attack, Leonard's wife actually survived. She didn't die, and they continued living with Leonard, with his condition. And, in the story, Sammy's wife is actually Leonard's wife, and he was the one who administered all the insulin, and she was hoping that he would remember, or he was faking it, and then he would come out of it, or he'd, just own up to it, that he was actually faking. And he accidentally killed his own wife. She overdosed on insulin, and she went into a coma and died. Now, Leonard, when he hears all this, he just can't handle the grief so much that he distanced himself from that story. I think he conditions himself away from that story and distances himself and creates sort of, drops Sammy Jankis in the place of himself because he can't deal with the grief, of what he's done, whether subconsciously or not. So, see, this movie's it's a mind fuck, this movie. And then finally, we find out in the final moments of the film, which is actually the beginning of the story, Leonard realizes that in this moment, he may have actually got John G, and he finds out, Teddy tells him that it's because John G is such a common name, that anyone could have it. He's like, I'm a John G. And then Leonard gets in the car and he's so pissed and he writes on this Polaroid, he's like, don't believe his lies, and writes down Teddy's license plate to get tattooed on him. He's like, you can be my John G. So Leonard, in his own way, because now he's already killed the man who attacked his wife, didn't actually murder her, who attacked his wife, and she's not around anymore because he accidentally killed her, because he didn't remember that the guy actually has nothing to live for. So what's he going to live for if he doesn't have a John G to chase? So he leaves himself clues. He makes up his own narrative. He gives himself something to chase, even though he's already completed his goal. He killed the man who attacked his wife and put him, who gave him this condition. It's an absolute, mindfuck. It's incredibly hard to explain. Twists are really hard to explain. I should have just done, a retro review like I originally planned, but, this is kind of fun. You guys have all seen these movies. You know what they're like. You know the stories yourself, but, yeah, just trying to put them into context, it's kind of hard, especially a movie like Memento, that plays in order and out of order at the same time. It's really fucking tricky. So we're going to move on to my final film, my number one favourite movie twist of all time, and one that fucking hit me the most. It's The Prestige. It's another Christopher Nolan film. So, if you haven't seen this movie, it's absolutely stupendous. It's absolutely spectacular. If you haven't seen it, go out and watch it right now, and then come back and listen to this, but if you're here, you probably have watched it, so let's just listen here. So, the movie is at the end of the 19th century in London, England. We have two magicians, Robert Angier, played by Hugh Jackman, and Alfred Borden, played by Christian Bale. Now, they start out as sort of partners in the same sort of magic act and stuff, and then Hugh Jackman's wife is also in their act and that as well. Alfred and his wife, played by Papa Parabo, they decide they have this water escape where she's chained and, She gets out of her chains and she climbs out of the water tank and everything's great and everybody's happy. But she's like, do a different knot and all this sort of stuff. They keep saying, no, it's too dangerous. It's too dangerous to play with my wife's life like this. And then they decide to do it anyway at the beginning of the act. He does a different knot. So he does a different knot and his wife ends up dying. And so they split up after this. Hugh Jackman's just hates Alfred Borden, Christian Bale's character, with a passion because, he inadvertently caused his wife's death. And so these two become rival magicians and they create their own shows. And Christian Bale's character, Borden, he creates this act. It's called The Transported Man. So he bounces a ball across the stage and he walks through one door and then the door on the other side of the stage opens and he comes out and catches the ball. So he's transported from one side of the stage to the other. And the movie becomes about Hugh Jackman's obsession to work out how he does this trick and to one-up him. And so these two guys are obsessed, like their lives are for magic. It's everything, magic is first, and everything else comes secondary. And so these two have this great rivalry over the years. Hugh Jackman comes up, he finds out how he actually does the Transporter Man. He comes up with his own. He finds a guy who looks similar enough to him. And Hugh always starts the trick, but he ends up under the stage and he never gets the prestige at the end of the act. It's always like the drunk lookalike that's always on stage. And Hugh wants to be the one on stage. He wants to be the one that gets the prestige. So things go along and Scarlett Johansson's involved and he sends her to spy on one another. Anyway, in the end, Jackman ends up with Christian Bale's journal and it has like all these magic secrets and that in it, but it's totally in cipher. Once he solves the cipher, there's one word, the keyword to solve the cipher is Tesla. So then he travels across the world to meet Nikola Tesla, played by David Bowie, and he enlists him to create a machine for him, to make him a machine where he can actually be the Transported Man, a machine that will transport him from one's place to another, the real Transported Man. And so at first, Tesla's not interested, but after badgering, he relents and he agrees to make this machine, but he informs that it may not be what he wants it to be, just a trick. This won't just be a trick, this will be a serious piece of scientific equipment. And so they build this machine, and then they find out that it works, and he can actually transport himself from one location to another. And so things go along, and there's bloody framed murders involved, because everyone thinks that Borden actually murdered Hugh Jackman's character, because the Transported Man, the real Transported Man, actually doesn't work. Tesla's machine doesn't work. When it happens, he drops into the floor, and someone's put a big water cage in there, and he falls into it, and he drowns, and Borden's there, and that Borden's actually killed him, and he's arrested. And then later on, Hugh comes and visits him at prison, and actually reveals that the machine never transported him. It never worked originally like the way he planned. What it actually did was it copied him. So whoever went into the machine actually was copied, and they appeared, so many tens of meters away from the actual machine. So Hugh Jackman's real Transported Man trick, he would walk into the machine and he would be cloned, and his clone would appear on the other side of the stage or the other side of the theater, and there was a hatch, and Hugh Jackman would fall and into the water tank, and he would drown. So every time Hugh Jackman performed this trick, like he's going into this machine to actually die, and that his copy would appear on the other side of the stage. Would I be the same person? Would I actually know? And it's really weird. And then we find out at the end of the movie, the big twist. Well, that's half the twist, but the rest of the twist is that Alfred Borden, who is actually sort of the sort of everyman's magician, his Transported Man trick, he actually had a twin. He has a twin brother, and his twin brother would follow him around as like his valet, Fallon. You know, he's on all makeup and mustache and, you know, all this nose prosthetics and all this sort of stuff. But him and his brother would switch. So sometimes Christian Bale, Alfred Borden would be Fallon, and another day he'd be his regular self. And it really fucked with his home life with his wife. And his wife would pick up that there was always something different about him. Like one day he'd be okay and, you know, I can tell you love me today. And then another day she'd be like, you don't love me today, because it was actually his brother who didn't love her. And so Borden's brother, who we'll just refer to as Fallon, is actually executed for the murder of Hugh Jackman. And then at the end of the film, Borden kills Hugh and burns down his warehouse where he keeps all his water tanks filled with all his dead clones. So that's kind of the twist. Didn't explain it very well because it's very fucking hard to explain. But the thing about The Prestige is the whole movie is like one big magic trick. Like, you know, they say with magicians and stuff that you never actually, when they perform a magic trick, you never actually look where you're meant to look. You never actually see the makings of the trick because you don't want to see it. You want to be fooled. You want to be tricked. So they grab your attention and make you look in another direction. But on a second viewing, you pick up on all these subtle clues. Like, all the evidence is there in front of you that you need to realize that Borden actually has a twin. You know, these tricks are faked. You know, some of the dialogue, things that are said, scenes, how they're played, it's all there. All the evidence is there for you to work out what's going on, but you don't see it because you don't want to see it. And that was one of the great things about this movie. Not only is it a movie about two rival magicians and their all-consuming obsession that is magic and to be the better magician. I mean, these guys live it. These guys totally live it, even though it's ruined their lives. It's ruined Borden's life with his wife. Like, his wife kills herself. And Hugh is just totally obsessed with just being a better magician, about just one-upping Borden. And so that's a great thing about this movie, about what Christopher Nolan did. The entire movie is one beautiful magic trick. It's all there. You can see it if you want to see it, but if you don't want to, the first time around, you won't. And it was such a great reveal to find out that this machine that he was actually using was actually cloning him. You know, it wasn't actually transporting him. It was cloning him. It was making a copy. And then the original person who walked into the machine, the original Hugh Jackman, had to be killed for the illusion of the trick to stick. He had to die. So every time he walked into that machine, he knew that they were the last few steps he was taking. He was going to his death. And that a copy would carry on in his place. Which is, it's fucking incredible. And on Borden's side is that he has a twin brother. And they stuck to this fantasy, or to this ruse, that, you know, Fallon was like his valet, but it was actually his twin brother, you know, and they shared lives. They would swap lives. Sometimes he would be Borden, sometimes he would be Fallon, and the other way around. And there's a scene in the movie where Christian Bale gets a couple of his fingers shot off, and then they show at the end, like, the trick, the illusion had to be 100% credible, authentic. So it shows his twin brother cutting off his same two fingers that got shot off. That's their dedication to the trick, to the magic. And that is my favourite movie twist, and it's actually my favourite Christopher Nolan film as well. Movie twists are really fucking hard to explain. Jesus, I should have picked something a bit easier. But all you guys know it, you've seen all these movies. But for me, in my life, those were my 5 favourite movie twists. Saw, Unbreakable, Shutter Island, Memento, and The Prestige. And that'll do us for this week. Tell me some of your favourite movie twists, because there are so many movies out there that have got great twists. I mean, it was really hard just narrowing it down to these 5, because there are so many out there. I've got a big list on another page in my notebook here, where I wrote down so many others, but I just had to whittle it down into these 5 picks. But yeah, definitely tell me some of your favourite movie twists. Like, comment below, message us on Facebook, and let us know. So that's it for another week. Thanks everyone for listening. Like I said, Bobby should be back next week. He had another project on, so he was pretty swamped. So unfortunately couldn't make it this week. But yeah, he should be back next week. And we're actually doing a lot of talk about doing audio commentaries. I mentioned this the other week, but we're actually pretty keen. It is something that we are going to do, but when we're going to start that, it's just all a matter of getting free time just to sit down and watch a movie and record a track and that for it. Where we're going to post those, that's another story. We'll get to that later on as we nut it all out. But as always, if you want to find us online, you can go to Facebook, facebook.com/BeardedGeeksPod. You can go to Instagram and check us out on Instagram, on Twitter at BeardedGeeksPod. If you want to listen to the show, you can listen to us on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. Please remember to drop some likes, like the videos on SoundCloud, leave a review on iTunes, because that'd be fucking great. If you really like the show, leave us a 5-star review. All of our reviews on iTunes are actually 5 stars at the moment, which is really good. And yeah, YouTube as well. Remember to like and share a couple of videos as well. If you've got some mates, like tell them to jump on and bloody have a bit of a listen to one of these episodes. So thanks everyone. The banter should be back next week, and we'll see you all next week on the Bearded Geeks. There was no twist in this episode. The twist is that twists are really hard to explain. Thanks guys. See you later. Hey!